everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Azure Flash News. Today, Rick is going to show us all about and give us a tour of Azure APIM, API Management, as well as App Gateway. Hey, Rick, how's it going today?
It is going great. It is a happy Friday. I know the weather's not the best out here in Minneapolis, but I'll take it because it's a Friday, and that means the weekends are coming.
That's right, the weekend's coming. I'm just looking outside, and it's stopped raining now. It's been kind of a dreary day. It's been a little bit cold today. I think the high is 43 and the low is 43. It's very strange.
A perfect day to demo technologies and stay inside, right? I mean,
that is exactly right. I'm so excited. Looking forward to this. Hey, Rick, why don't you give us a little bit of background into why are we talking about this today? Like, what brought this up for you?
Yeah, no, that's thanks for asking. So recently we've been working with a customer who had some questions around application gateway, best practices around securing the actual instance of app gateway, best practices potentially around authentication, best practices around possibly being able to service the API request from an internally on the virtual network, as well as coming from the internet. So I decided, instead of trying to whiteboard and draw pictures and have people imagine things in the mind's eye, which can be challenging sometimes, is to actually build something of a prototype to show how this would work. And so that's where I came up with this nice little demo that kind of demonstrates different paths through the system. It demonstrates the ability to have HTTP listeners on different ports, for example, and shows how you can set it up so literally traffic from internal to internal is enforced, as well as external to internal is enforced as well.
Okay, all right. So let me make sure I understand what we've got here, and maybe I'm kicking you off here. I don't know, but let's see. So if we have APIM first, and then behind that we have App Gateway, or App Gateway is first and APIM second?
So I have a App Gateway as basically your proxy to the inner world, the interwebs. Then I've got Application Gateway sitting right behind that. And then to test the API calls, I've stood up a very simple web server running IIS with a MVC app that just has the default demo for the values controller.
All right, great. So that's App Gateway,
then
API Management, and then your web service running on a VM or something.
Yep, that's correct. And then I do have one other VM that I provisioned so that I could show how you can get to one of the APIs but not the other one because of the way it's brokered.
Okay. So now, as far as the VNet is concerned, what's public and what's not?
The only thing that's public in this instance is the App Gateway.
Okay.
So everything else is hidden behind your network, basically boundary.
Okay, so the App Gateway is working as your public internet internal network reverse proxy.
Yeah, think of it as an ingress controller.
Ingress controller. That's awesome. Okay.
Even though we're not talking about containers, it's kind of it's a request controller.
You know, as we know in the container world, sometimes the container world has taken stuff that's been around a long time to give it a new name, and it's this amazing new technology. The ingress controller is just a reverse proxy on Kubernetes. I mean, come on, we all know that.
I love it.
Okay, so this is exciting. I mean, I'm like seeing like you have DNS set up, you have the whole thing, soup to nuts, the whole thing. Wow, look at all this.
I do.
So I'm going to switch over to your screen so people can see it here.
Yeah, please. Okay, awesome.
Okay, so people are looking at your screen now.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so I've got a resource group that I've provisioned, and I've I logically called it APIM.
Okay, nice.
I wasn't very creative,
nice.
very obvious, intuitive. So as you mentioned, I've got APIM, POC.com. And the reason I provision that is because I don't know if people understand, when you provision internal only APIM, what happens is APIM can only be accessed by an FQDN. Okay.
That's correct.
So it can't be accessed by IP address. So I had to actually use Azure private DNS zones to create an FQDN so that internally I can talk to that service, and requests coming from App Gateway can talk to that service as well.
Right.
So that's one of the gotchas that people need to look out for if they want to provision this internal only, is that they have to have FQDN that they can access that capability.
But this one right here, this DNS that we're looking at here, this is the public DNS record, so that your App Gateway can take traffic on the public internet, right? Or no, this is the private zone.
This is private.
Sorry, this is the private zone. I apologize.
So APIM, remember, APIM takes zero traffic directly from the internet.
Right.
Yep, exactly. So if I go back here, Yep. So you'll see I've got a private
Oh,
DNS zone
sure.
configured.
I'm looking over here at the left saying DNS, but of course right here,
Oh,
just one column over, it clearly says private DNS
private.
zone.
Yep. I won't hold it against you, I promise. And then I've got an app gateway, obviously. We
Okay.
talked about the application gateway being the proxy into the system.
Right.
Key Vault in this case was
Oh.
actually provisioned because I did some programmatic deployments. There's a way that you can actually take a project that you create in Visual Studio and actually deploy it directly onto the IIS instance of the VM running in Azure.
Oh, sure.
That's a lazy way to do it. Friends don't let friends right click and publish, okay?
Right.
That's not how we would do this in the
Right.
real world.
Yes.
I would absolutely have a CI/CD pipeline, and it would all be clean and clear and safe and secure. But that's why it's there, just FYI.
Okay.
And then, of course, I've got some IP addresses.
Yep.
That's the public IP address for the app gateway. I have implemented DDoS protection plan because I can, right?
Because why
Want that
not?
DDoS.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's DDoS for the public side of your app gateway.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, of course, I have my API management solution.
Nice.
I've got an internal client. That is a test client so that I can use just-in-time credentialing. I can RDP onto that machine, and that just-in-time credentialing will actually open the RDP port for a limited amount of time until that session's over, so I can actually demonstrate how the traffic would look internal only.
It's a little bit like a jump box, so that you're inside the network and can hit those things from the inside. Okay, all
In
right.
fact, I could have, as an alternative, I probably could have just deployed Bastion as a service.
Sure.
Yep, and then of course the rest of this is network interface cards, disks.
There's your API server.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And then of course a storage account. Yep. So if you look at the virtual network, I just so everybody knows, there's nothing up my sleeve, right? We've got a VNet, and I've got these. This is what's provisioned, right? So let me do this so you can. Whoops, I don't want the portal menu. I want. Oh, my browser window is too small to have. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong thing there. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So you can see within the context of my virtual network, I have these two network interfaces, which are specifically based for the web server and my client. And then I've got these two subnets, which basically are for my application gateway and for my APIM. Okay, so in this case, I've got two application gateway instances provisioned because that's for high availability. So that's basically, those are the connected devices on the system. Okay.
Right. Okay.
But for some reason, why can't I see toggle full screen mode? Nope, that's not what I was looking for. I wanted to show, like in the VNet, there's the other attributes I can see on the left-hand side, and I don't have my left-hand side.
Where they went.
I think it's
Can you do the
small
hamburger over there on the left? Oh, there.
Yeah, this is for the.
That's for the whole thing.
Yeah. So here we go. So even though it bleeds off a little bit, unfortunately, you guys can still see this navigation on the left, correct? Okay. So if I go down into this navigation and I show the diagram, that's what I wanted to show here.
Nice.
Yeah, so you'll see the actual network topography that's been provisioned to support these data resources. Nice. So you can see here I've got my internal client, again, could be a Bastion host. I've got my network security group, which right now doesn't let any traffic in. And then, of course, I've got my internal IP address for my NIC. And then the same thing holds true for my web API server. And then here's my three default APIM and app gateway subnets, right? And then, of course, the top level is the VNet that everything's provisioned into.
Right.
So
I love this view because it gives you, like, you don't even have to go into, like, Visio. You can just come to here. It's always up to date. It's great.
Absolutely. I do kind of wish that for APIM and for App Gateway, it would blow it out a little bit more. But the thing people have to remember is those are actually platform as a service offerings, right? And even though they do get provisioned into a VNet, there's really nothing there. I mean, that
just a network connection.
Yeah, as engineers, as developers, solution developers, that we essentially need to worry about. It's just more the configuration of the service.
Right.
So, whoa, hey, how you doing? So I'm going to go ahead I'm going to click on, let me go back into my APIM, and I'm going to show, the first thing is, where's my web server? There it is. All right, so let's connect to this web server. So I'm going to ask it to RDP, and you can see it's basically making a request because I have just-in-time access enabled, and I'm configured IP. I can source my IP.
So in other words, what happens is when you ask for it, it opens up the network security group just when you ask, and then when you're done, the network security group closes back up, and there's no IP access.
Yep, you absolutely got it. So it's making a request for just-in-time access on port 3389. The request has been approved, so I'm going to download my RDP file,
right,
and I'm going to open it. Open, says me. And I know sometimes this can take a second or two based on the because of the fact that it has to do the NSG updates and stuff. Come on, what's going on?
Not quite yet.
Machine is on, so let's try that again. Let's open the file. Come on, make your change.
Just-in-time VM access. It takes a second.
It's not quite just in time. Oh, this is interesting that it's taken such a while. Oh, you know what? I need to double check though. Something simple. Okay, so I am running.
You are running.
Okay, just wanted to double check that. So let's see. So RDP, request access. Okay, requesting just-in-time access. And I can do this without accessing the machine. It's just the other one's going to be the important one, so of course. So we'll go ahead and download this. We're going to open this. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so I've already got a predefined username and password, so I'm going to log in there. And now you're going to see my desktop on my server, and this is the server that's actually running the websites that are going to be served up via APIM and App Gateway.
Okay.
Okay, so if I just quickly jump in here and I go to, come on. Apparently I'm not a very patient person.
Rick, you're just keeping this computer so busy.
Right? Administrative tools, Internet Information Services.
Nice. Good old IIS. Love it.
Kicking it old school.
Yeah.
So you can see I've got two sites. I've got the default website, which is listening on port 80.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
So we consider changing password. So you can see browse port 80. And I also have this particular site, which I've set up just to show this particular capability. So in this case, you can see it's port 801. Right? So remember that. So we've got one running on 80, and we've got one running on 801.
Nice.
All right. So again, just to show there's nothing up my sleeves, that's kind of what this solution looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here, and I'm going to close this out. And let's see, there we go. Okay, so that's been demonstrated. So now what I need to do is I need to go back to my solutions, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at this GM API MO. So this is interesting, right? So I again, in order to have the developer portal available and to have the gateway URL and the proxy and all that stuff, so those things actually have to be mapped, right, and created. So I've got that solution set up with apim poc.com. We saw that in the private DNS zone, right? But interestingly enough, so if I look at this, if I go ahead and click on the gateway URL, right?
Yep.
I can't get to it.
No access. And of course, that's because
that is not a publicly accessible URL. Right.
You're on the internet right now. You're trying to access from your PC locally to the APIM, which of course is actually in a virtual network, and that DNS zone is only applied to that virtual network. So only items in that virtual network can access that DNS entry, which guides them to the APIM.
Absolutely. So now here's the infamous application gateway.
Right.
So you can see I've got a front end public IP address. I've got a private IP, but what we care about right now is the front end public IP address. Right. So if I click on this, I've got this nice little DNS name that I've created. So I'll copy that, and I'm going to
default. This is stayed with the default DNS name that comes right out of from creating the Azure resource.
That is correct. So what I've done in this particular case is you can see this is on port 801. So what I did in APIM was I said for this particular port, I want a listener on port 801 that's going to service requests from the outside world. Okay. So you can see basically I've got the generic sample demo app, right? The string value 1, value 2, but I also wanted to call out that it's coming from port 801, right? Now, interestingly enough, though, is if I try to do this and I say this, watch what happens.
I'm expecting port 80. Let's see if I'm right.
No. So what I've done was I set this up so that on port 801, that's the one that's accessible via the external world. Okay. Can't reach
Oh.
this page. So
Aha. So
just
you meant
values
for
on
this to
80.
happen.
Yes, I
You
did. You
meant for
got it.
this to happen. Okay,
Yes, I did.
so let me ask a question then.
Yeah.
How did you make this inaccessible from the internet? Did you close off port 80 on the app gateway, or did you close off port 80 on API management, or did you close off
So
port 80 on the VM?
the app gateway only has one listener. So if we look at the
Oh, okay,
configuration, so
okay,
if we go back into my app gateway,
all right.
right? There's that
Yeah,
situation
there's
right
that
there.
thing again.
There we go. So if you look at my front end IP
Okay,
configurations,
sure.
okay, I've got my public and my private
Yep,
there, right?
yep,
But it's got a proxy listener, right? So you can
yep.
see here it says associated listeners. It's got a proxy listener,
Mm-hmm,
and then it's
mm-hmm,
got a private proxy listener.
mm-hmm.
Private proxy listener is the one we care about, but that's an internal private IP
Right,
address, right?
right, right.
So if we look at the proxy listener, okay, if I go to my listeners,
Right.
you're going to see proxy listener and
Yep,
private, okay?
yep,
So
yep,
proxy listener 801,
yep,
private listener 80, but
yep.
only on the internal IP address.
So app gateway here has two ears.
Yep.
It has one
Yes.
ear into the internal network, and
Yep.
on that ear it's listening on port 80,
Yep.
and it's got one ear to the external public internet, the
Yep.
public internet, and
Yep.
it's listening on
Public.
801.
Exactly. That's correct. So yeah, so you can see now, so I've got the 801 is the
Mm-hmm.
public here. And then of course port 80, as it shows, is I've got private port
Private.
80.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a private proxy rule,
Yep, yep,
right? So if I go to private proxy rule,
yep,
you'll see that I've got the private proxy rule and it's bound to the listener, right?
yep,
And so that's all set up, and it's in this listener. If I wanted to, if there were others, so here's the backend targets,
yep,
and this is the important
yep,
part,
yep.
right? So there's a backend pool. You can see proxy backend, proxy HTTP. So that's just using straight HTTP. I didn't
Right.
get fancy and use S. I could. We
Right.
absolutely could.
Yeah.
But then it also targets the proxy backend. So if I
Yep.
cancel this,
Yep.
and if we go back here, and I think I got to slide this over a little bit. Yep.
Yep.
So we got to look at the backend pools.
Right.
So here's proxy backend, right? So both of them will target the proxy backend, but only one of them is going to accept responses on that 801 port.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then in the API management, I've got different so the 801 target. So what happens is the app gateway on the 801, the public proxy, it is actually the backend pool is the values API in
Yep.
API management.
Yep.
And then the private one or the public one, I'm sorry, is actually of API called values 801. So
Okay.
it knows that that's the one you want to listen to.
Right. Right.
And then of course the private one is just values. So to
Right.
demonstrate that, I will go ahead and click on internal
Right.
client,
Right. Right.
and I'm going to connect, and it's going to say I need to request access. So this might take a while. Again, bear with me.
Yep. So just oh, there, it's already done. I'll let you go ahead. I'll ask my question.
No, go ahead. Keep asking.
Well, I was just
keep
going to
asking.
say, so in other words, you have one backend set up for App Gateway, and it's the
Yep.
API management instance, and the public ear and the private ear, 801 on the public and 80 on the private side, they're both
Yep.
targeting the backend, which is API management.
That is correct.
So in other words,
So in
on
this
the
case,
internal, it's
nothing goes-
inside internal and
Oops.
outside out the internal as well. Both
Correct.
it's in and right back out. It never goes public on that internal.
So the nice thing about this though too is because I forced everything through the app gateway instead of allowing traffic right to the APIM from the one solution, is that in this scenario you could still get a denial of service attack from an internal source,
Sure.
right? You could still get somebody who's trying to do a SQL injection attack from the inside, right?
Yeah, right.
The whole notion of this network boundary as a safe zone, that's a fallacy,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we recommend this implementation and just this configuration just generally, because identity is the new firewall, right? We've said
That's
that 1,000 times
Yeah.
on this show.
Well, and I always like to say, if
There
you're
it is.
hosting your internal APIs differently than you host them on the public internet, then you probably ought to change the way you host them on the inside. You really ought to host them the
100%
same way.
agree.
There's really no reason to believe that
Zero trust.
That's right, zero trust. Whatever you needed to do to make it accessible on the public internet with JOT tokens and Azure Active Directory or whatever you use, you should probably do that on the inside as well.
100% agree. So I made this really easy. I've got an internal app gateway connection. So you can see on my screen 10.0.7.10. And if you remember
Sure.
correctly, that's the private IP address, right, for the app gateway.
Yeah.
Right? and then it's just going to the slash value. So it's not port 801, it's just straight port 80.
Mm-hmm.
So if I double click on that, because this browser is so old, it doesn't know how to interpret a JSON file, but it does allow me to click open. And let's see, I'll see if I can do this. I can't add a file. So if I do this, I guess what I can do is I can save it to the desktop or open with, and we'll just say like Notepad. There we go.
Oh, I see. Yep.
There.
Yep.
So there you go. So this is, I know it says from 801. That's an error. I accidentally, I just realized that when I pushed my new project out. Yes, exactly. So it's supposed to say from 80, not from 801.
Yeah.
That was a fat finger coding error.
So now we have seen how you can take your internal requests, route them through what we generally think of as a public resource.
Yep.
You know, the app gateway we normally think of as saying, well, we only do that when people come into our network. But now we've seen how we can dual use our app gateway. So the app gateway reverse proxy WAF, which is one of the things you referred to about SQL injection and whatnot, is that we can actually go in there and say, we want to be able to listen both internally and externally, so that internal people and external people go through the same WAF rule set.
Exactly. So just to tie this, just to put a nice bow around this conversation, you'll see that I've got basically a set of APIs called web server APIs. Okay. And that's my collection, or that's my catalog of APIs that are coming from that web server, right? So you can see I've got two. I should have two. They're right there. Yep. There value and values, right?
Yep.
So value. So value is you can see it's going to HTTP endpoint. The backend endpoint is pointing to that server, and values is going to do the same thing, except you can see that one's talking to it on port 801. Right. So the other thing I wanted to do here was I wanted to show that you had the ability to also specify ports on your internal server as well. So you don't always have to be 80 and 443.
Yeah, and I think
not that I recommend that type of implementation, but it absolutely can be done.
And I think this is an interesting demonstration of how you can have an API in API management, and per verb, you can go in and start applying these API management policies, which is where, the rubber meets the road in API management, to say that the backend for this request is this server, and the backend for this request is a different server. So this is how developers can start tying this stuff together.
Oh, totally. You're absolutely right. This is how things start to get tied together. So, so I've got my value. In this case, I could call that's what this is. So in this case, I have the non-port 80, and if I call the ID space with value, I would get value 5, right? So I've got both of those. So one of them, of course, is listening on 801. And so this demonstrates the ability to actually show both of those. So if I went into my internal client and typed in just value with an actual ID, I would have gotten 1, but it wouldn't say from port 801.
Right.
Yeah.
This is really cool, Rick. I think that sometimes it's really easy to get focused on like one specific technology, just app gateway or just API management. And we talk about these things in isolation when really you never use them in isolation, right? You always use them in conjunction with other technologies. And so it's really important for people like you to help bring it all together for us, so that we can understand how the flow goes and how we can actually start building interesting architectures out of these building blocks.
Well, and building blocks, exactly. We are snapping Legos together.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the funny thing about this solution, you know what the longest part of building the solution was?
What's that?
Provisioning App Gateway.
Waiting for it to provision, right?
Waiting for App Gateway to provision. It does take a little bit of while. It's between 10 and 20 minutes. But literally, that was the longest. That was the long pole in the tent for me building the solution, was just simply waiting for that to provision.
Right.
Once I went into, APIM. Provisioning APIM.
Yeah.
Because if you look at my APIM provision specifically around the, this is what I had to do. So you can see virtual network, internal.
Oh, right. That
if
one
I
takes
set
a little
it
extra
external,
time, doesn't it?
Yeah, correct. But if I set it external, that would say this has access to anything in the external world. We didn't want that, right? All I wanted to do was only allow the internal access, so we could prove those paths. And as you saw, when I brought up the URL, I got basically the proxy.api, poc.com.
Right.
It didn't work. Yep.
Right.
So I just wanted to call that out. That's how you basically, in effect, block off all your traffic from the interwebs to the API management solution, is by making it an internally provisioned configuration setting.
Right, right. And I just wanted to add one more thing. This
Yeah.
all runs off of one IP address, the way API management does. And so that's why you have to tell it the DNS, because it's a different address for the developer portal and a different, FQDN. It's a different FQDN for the developer portal and a different FQDN for the gateway portal, which is kind of the service gateway. And so API management doesn't know which one of those you want to talk to if you just use the IP address. And that's why we have to set up the DNS for this. Always, you have to set up custom DNS. If you're going to, you have to set up the full FQDN if you're going to make it internal, because of course that's the DNS. And then externally, if you want your own custom DNS, same thing applies. That's the only way it knows the difference between which endpoint you want to talk to.
Exactly. Yep, you got it. So you can see I've got management, I've got portal, and I've got proxy. So management is the management of the solution, the dev portal. The portal is where the developers go in and register and get the key. And then, of course, the proxy is the actual API proxy that proxies the requests.
Yeah, that's where the APIs are served.
Yeah,
this is awesome. This is really
like I said,
cool, Rick.
and the other cool thing about all this is I didn't have to go scour the internet. I didn't have to go, knock down doors on the engineering teams or PMs. I basically did all this through we've got our Azure Architecture Center, and we've got our learning docs. And everything I did here was completely sourced by those two resources as a baseline to get this up and running. Anybody can, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's right. That's right. We always say that. It's really very straightforward to get through this stuff. Learn it. It's at your fingertips. Go ahead and take the opportunity to try this stuff out. This is how you can actually get some hands-on experience and try some of these things out, because you don't have to go out and buy a license for it. You don't have to make a long-term commitment. You can stand this thing up for a day or two and then tear it down whenever you're done. And, it just doesn't cost a lot. Plus, the other thing is that if you're going to stand it up and tear it down quickly, then that gives you an opportunity to try out something like ARM templates or Bicep. And if you're interested in Bicep, you can go back and see a video we did a little while back on how to use Bicep to automate your infrastructure. And so it's a really valuable muscle to exercise about infrastructure as code, using a pipeline, whether it's GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, to automate the flow of your infrastructure code to production, which essentially is the creation of the infrastructure itself.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And that's the thing. So the nice thing about that too, to your point, is it's idempotent, right? I can make it transient. I could set this up as a demo. And if I'm using Bicep, if I'm using, CI/CD pipelines, I can reprovision this entire solution and configuration at will if I wanted to.
Right.
Because this is not super expensive, but if I don't have to have it up and running, why would I?
It's really expensive if you don't have to run it all the time. So that means that testing stuff out, trying it out, becomes really inexpensive and something that we should all go ahead and try and do.
Yeah.
Is that it? That was awesome.
That is it. I know that. Wait, there's more. No, just kidding.
Yeah, but wait, there's more. No, actually there isn't. So Rick, if people want to ask you any additional questions about this, how would they get in touch with you?
And I would absolutely encourage you, if you have any questions or comments, or if you run into a conundrum, you can always reach me at Rick, WEY, at Microsoft.com. That's my actual Microsoft address. Yep. And of course, I'm always listening to the Twitter feed and looking for direct private messages, and that's at Azure Flash News.
Yep.
And Mark, what about you?
Well, you can email me at my Microsoft email. I'm happy to take email there. mgarner@microsoft.com. That's totally fine. And then also you can catch me on Twitter, mgarner@microsoft.com. And one more place I want to mention, we don't usually mention, is please feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube video.
Absolutely.
And make sure that you hit the subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you can get a notification whenever we publish a new video. And make sure and like the video too. That helps.
Yeah, please do. Please do. And as you've noticed, we've gotten more into demonstration of capabilities instead of just talking about them. And the new format seems to have been a hit.
So let us know. Give us your feedback. We want to hear it. Put some comments in there. Subscribe, like, all that stuff. You know how it works out there on the YouTube land. So
that's right. Yeah. So awesome. So I guess we're about wrapped up for this particular YouTube video, and I just want to thank the audience, thank everybody who tunes in and pays attention. Obviously, without you guys, Mark and I are just boring people talking to each other in a vacuum. So really appreciate that.
We do it for you guys.
Yeah, exactly. So always looking forward to having these conversations with Mark, of course, and more importantly with everybody out there in the internet ether. So looking forward to doing this type of engagement again, not the same time necessarily, but the same place. And until then, keep your fingers on your sterilized keyboard, a mask on your face, and your head in the clouds.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.